Let's take our minds back to the OBT activities where we had, if you recall or if you don't recall, please go back and look at that particular clip. You would find there was a point when the teams were divided. The 10 participants were divided into 5 and 5 people, teams of 5. And before that, when I told them to run around the goalpost, the instruction was, please go around that goalpost and come back. And then I made it a little more specific. I said, leave the goalpost to your right. Now, if you see the video, you would notice there were a few people who came from the left, who left the goalpost to their left, which means the flow of the traffic, that means our own people running, wasn't smooth enough. There was a hindrance in between. For growth, one of the aspects that this particular exercise event tells us is process compliance. When I say process compliance, there are many standard operating procedures that may not be to our liking when we work in any company, wherever we are, in the beginning. And it takes a little while to understand why this is being done in the manner it has been going on for years together. It is okay to question. That is another step that will come a little later when you want to entirely change the process for the betterment of the organization. And so we come to this point now about getting fixed to a particular standard operating procedure and process compliance alone, carry on, or is there a scope for us to ask questions, clarify your doubts, why a particular thing is to be done like this? In some way, one of these two relates to fixed versus growth mindset.
There are two main categories of mindsets: fixed mindset and growth mindset. Have you all not been asked or kind of forced in a soft sense to look smart always, and we want to always look intelligent and bright in front of others? So we end up not taking challenges. But has it really helped us? Early in my life, I used to be more like that. Avoid challenges, I used to give up easily, and but over a period of time, that hasn't really helped me. With a lot of mentoring, with a lot of self-reflection, I have realized that it's helpful to attempt and embrace newer challenges. We may or may not succeed, but just by giving it an opportunity or a chance, we actually end up learning a lot more than actually working only on easy tasks. It is okay to not look good in the process. We might fail, but it is helpful because it is a lot more enriching. The other notion that was driving us was wanting to be the best in everything. And that self-image that we held very hardly onto, we didn't realize the amount of damage it was causing us in the overall learning process in life. But it lasted while it lasted until it had to be broken. And life has its own beautiful ways of teaching us lessons through situations. So for me too, I had a more or less a similar path, and I never used to understand and accept criticisms. I used to attach the criticism against me as a person rather than against what I did. That there is a big subtle difference. The criticism is never against a person, but it is about what we did in a task, right? Because the identity of my output was so closely held to my self-image of myself, and that did not prove helpful at all, because naturally it went into anger, frustration, all those unhelpful emotions. And naturally the related consequence was, because you always wanted to be on top, you couldn't stand others performing better than you. You felt that you have to keep striving hard, keep topping, being the best. Now over a period of time, rather than it actually plays a big toll, takes a big toll on your mental health and also physical health. And over a period of time, until I encountered and came across this growth mindset philosophy, it was all like that. But the moment this insight stuck, with a series of experiences to self reflect, with good guidance from mentors, a complete different perspective and a more meaningful way to live emerged, which is about one's performance is not about the results. It's about what Colonel Sir rightly pointed out. It's about the process. It's about giving the best possible under the circumstances. It's about facing setbacks, but it's also about learning from the setbacks. That's more important than the end output itself. And true success is a path to mastery, and it's not about winning every time, but it's about continuously striving to be the best. And the most important aspects is embrace criticism. Criticism, again, not about the person, but about the process, but about putting in efforts, redirecting the efforts so that the same setbacks and failures don't emerge. And lastly, it's not at all about getting threatened about by the success of others, but actually getting inspired about them. There is so much to learn from. There's so many inspirations that I see today in today's life. There are tons of inspirations that I see around me from various different walks of life, and that actually energizes me. I today don't try to say why am I not like them. Rather than I just get inspired by, hey, this is wow, this is awesome, this is great, and that actually gives in a sense of internal energy to me. And this is exactly what one derives when one adopts the path of growth mindset. Now, today, the achievement is not about the best in the world or trying to get everyone's eyes around, but it's more an internal sense of fulfillment that we are in a journey, and that's a more fulfilling journey.
I started using words of power and positivity, and one day I discovered that there was something called a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
I just wanted to add a couple of points. What I found is even the vocabulary that we use. For example, if we have 10 people, one is to divide them into two teams. The other way to put it is to group them into two teams. Suddenly, there is a shift in thinking about grouping rather than dividing. Same thing used to happen among we faculty members. So the conversation used to go this way. I mean, what's your course load next semester? Right? So the moment we shifted to saying, I'm offering a course next semester, this offering, the word offering gives so much power to whatever you mentioned. The same thing is conveyed, but in a way that you tend towards a growth mindset. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, as Karthik mentioned, we are always jealous of others when they succeed in life. Rather than thinking about it a little differently in a growth mindset, where we appreciate the success of others. By appreciating the success of others, appreciate, the word appreciate has to do with increasing the value of the other person. And therefore, what happens is, when you increase the value, you also learn how this success has happened with them. And therefore, you also tend to grow.
My experience with my very own fixed mindset happened when I came to IIT Madras. I was this little fish lost in a big ocean, feeling overwhelmed, totally clueless and lost. I found it very intriguing at that time that having secured a top rank and having joined one of the premier institutes in the country, I was struggling to find my way. And the interesting thing is, I realized that this feeling of overwhelm, this feeling of feeling totally clueless and out of place, and believing that everybody else is smarter than you are, is something that is even common today amongst the students. So the result was that I built a nice comfort zone around myself, and I refused to step out of it. So I was busy maintaining this image that I had of myself, a self-image that we build in our minds. And then I avoided challenges, told myself that if I couldn't do it right the first time or the first few times, then I couldn't do it at all. And over time, I convinced myself by telling myself that I was not meant for engineering and technology, or put it the other way, engineering and technology is not meant for me. I didn't know how to process feedback or ask for it in the first place, and use it to, and put it to effective use. I was totally overwhelmed by the go-getters that I saw around me, the extroverts who could speak well, express themselves well, and all the smart people around me. So I told this beautiful story to myself that my brain has reached its limits of intelligence, performance, and potential. And I called it the brain freeze moment. And I know many times Shiva asks, what is this brain freeze? And how can anybody have a brain freeze? And I tell him, yes, you can have a brain freeze. And I remember going through it. This happened for quite some time. After I waded through all possible fears that I could imagine in my head, or the thousands of fears, and exhausted all possible excuses, it dawned upon me one fine day, that I had achieved nothing by staying in my comfort zone, not stepping out of it, and being ruled over by all my fears and the resulting excuses. I hadn't gained anything at all. So that was the moment of truth for me, when I realized that here I was feeling miserable and unhappy and not really achieving much, and I had nothing else to lose. This is the moments I would imagine, people go through that rock bottom time, when you reach the rock bottom and there's no other way to go but just spring back up. And that's exactly what happened to me. And what's the worst that could happen anymore anyway? So that is when the shift happened. I realized that my happiness was my responsibility, and I had the power of choice. So I could continue to be miserable. I could continue to be overset by my fears and continue with my excuses, or I could choose to take that step forward and move forward. So I started exploring, experimenting, making mistakes. I started learning. So I started exploring, experimenting. I started to learn and grow with tiny steps, perhaps at times. I learned from my mistakes. I converted stumbling blocks into tiny stepping stones. I started using words of power and positivity. And one day I discovered that there was something called a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.